Good morning, everyone. The class participants of the course of Politics of International Cooperation and Politik Kerjasama Internasional 2020. This morning, we will start again the meeting with the next topic. But before we continue the discussion, please be reminded of class projects. Please contact your tutors for the group allocations. Don't hesitate to contact Mas Handono Eka, or you can also contact me related to the class project and also the due date for every groups. Now, this morning we will discuss about rational design of international regimes. Last time we've learned about important actors, and also important mechanism in establishing international cooperation. Now, when international cooperation has been established into an institution, not necessarily always have to be international organization or regional organization, but a lot of forms of institutions can also be regarded as a manifestation of international cooperation. So let's say the collections of soft laws can also be regarded as an international regime, or customs. How do you call the regular way of interactions between international community or between states can be also regarded as regime, albeit it is not having any written legal form. Let's say diplomatic immunity, or the way states manage embassies and diplomatic relations among them, can also be considered as an international customs, or international unwritten consensus. And that kind of consensus can be also regarded as international regime. So when we talk about international regimes, we talk about a wide range of international institutional forms. Now, let's start page number 1, meeting 8. So this will be meeting 8 of the class of Politics of International Cooperation, Rational Design of International Regimes. What is rational design? What does it mean? Well, in this opportunity, we will use rational model, rational actor perspective in understanding how different states will arrange and design what kind of international cooperation that they really like to see in order to correlate, in order to be able to solve the problems that they face together. And the perspective is quite different from what we discussed last week, in which we put focus on constructivism. In this opportunity, we will use liberal institutional approach to see the rational design of international regime. Okay, so let us move to the second slide. Slide number 2. The scholarly work to be discussed today is an influential work by Ibu Barbara Koremenos, Bapak Charles Lipson, and Bapak Duncan Snidel. Yeah, in 2001, they wrote this piece titled "The Rational Design of International Institutions" in the Journal of International Organization, volume 55, number 4, page 761 to 799. If you have access to the journal, please do read the journal and tell me what do you think about the design of international regimes in our world. Please don't be hesitant to write down your comments, and if you have something to ask, please do so, yeah, in the comment section below or in the Facebook group. Now we go to the slide number 3. Various perspectives on international regime. Now, just like last meeting, we discussed about constructivism. Constructivists tend to believe that normative discourse is pivotal to support international cooperation. The basic premise of constructivism, they use norms as to understand how international cooperation is built. In its institutionalization, constructivists believe that normative discourse is very important. However, it will be in contrast with those who are coming from the realist school of international relations that tend to believe that international organizations are merely empty vessels for states to secure their interests. Yeah. Took different or two contrasting opinion on that. In constructivism, they believe that international organizations should play independent role in promoting international norms and values. Yeah, and this is in contrast with realism, that the realists believe that states will tend to impede the growing influence of international organizations or international institutions, yeah, because it will eventually hinder the states to maximize their pursuit for their own interests. Yeah, so here realism believes that states will more likely to impede international organizations to be significant and fully independent actor. Yeah, states will try to perpetuate the degree of influence, yeah, to the international organizations, and do not let international organizations to be fully independent. Now, that will be dangerous for states' sovereignty. Now, what you are affiliating yourself with, a constructivist approach or realist approach? Tell me what you think. Now, in this opportunity, we will take a look at those who base their argument from rational actors model and game theory model. and then they built this regime theory as part of institutionalist school. It is a very contested concept. So all of those three, at least three big schools of thought in international relations are competing each other, but we can learn from their different perspectives, to build or to provide yourself a greater picture in understanding international relations. All of them are contributing a lot into the study of international relations. The propositions now, we move to slide number 4. The proposition said that international organizations, this is what Ibu Koremenos, Pak Lipson, and Bapak Schneider argue. International organization represents the accommodation between states' interests and in international arena and institutional building mechanism. So international building process cannot be really separated, of course, from its state interests, but also states put some efforts to let the balancing process within the international institution. So institutional institutions are designed to create this balance in interest and in accommodating the durability and feasibility of international cooperation under the umbrella of the discussed regimes. The design and operation of an international organization relate to the problem that states have to deal with in different sectors, in different situations. There are different solutions, and has to be responded with different institutional design that are usually very rational. There are varieties of regime design, of course. We witness the establishment of a lot of international regimes, different international regimes, and they are not homogeneous in their forms, their membership, their scope, their voting mechanism. There are a lot of tweaks here and there. So what are the varieties that we usually see from different international regimes? Here about memberships, can be the number of the members, the area of membership that it encompasses. Some international organization encompasses all of the states in the world, or creating global society. Every nation state are included. Some other international organization only apply to certain region, or kawasan in bahasa Indonesia. For example, only in Southeast Asia, or international organization or regional organization, there is only for country in Latin America. The other international regime also only approve membership with certain quality. Yeah, for example, only producing palm oil. Yeah, like the cooperation between palm oil producing countries, or producing or becoming or country that is net oil exporter, like OPEC. Yeah. So the membership can be designed and can be customized. The area or scope of cooperation also different. There are international regimes that are working only on economic sector, only on security issues, perhaps on culture, so many things. The scope can be varied. Now, the other is voting mechanism, like weighted vote, yeah, or equal votes. Yeah, it all depends on the arrangement, yeah, and the degree of centrality. Yeah, some countries, some regimes have very centralized control, monitoring, and information sharing mechanism, and the other might not have that kind of control or that kind of centrality. And legal formal arrangement. Some are more loosely based, yeah, interactions. The other can be really legal formal. European Union, of course, having higher legal formal scale or level than Association of Southeast Asian Nation, or ASEAN. Yeah, it depends on the arrangement or agreement that has been reached by different members. To the next slide, slide number 5. Koremenos, Lipson, and Snyder conclude that states use international institutions to further their own goals, and they design institutions accordingly. Now, how to explain what does it mean by accordingly? Now, this question, yeah, raised, and Koremenos, Lipson, and Snyder want to help answering this question by providing, yeah, a framework for us to understand. Later we will talk about that. Next to the sixth slide number 6, the role of non-state actors. Yeah, so who are the actors? Of course, from previous slides, the important highlight or the focus were to the states. However, there are so many international actors in international arena. Yeah. So there are other non-state actors, yeah, apparently playing important roles in regime design. States play important role in most arrangement of international regimes. However, there are other actors that can also partake in designing the institutions. They can be NGOs, non-government organizations, or civil society. They can be international organizations. They can be multinational corporation or multinational firms, enterprises, business, and professionals. There are a lot of experts, professionals, yeah. And also, if we learn about previous meeting, the role of epistemic community. Don't forget about the importance of epistemic community. And the forms of international regimes, just like what I suggested before, there are many forms. There are two main forms of international regimes. The one is the formal one. We call it formal institutions, formal organizations, such as the United Nations, World Health Organization, International Labour Organization, ASEAN, etc. Yeah, so these are the organizations that have a formal form, yeah, has secretariat, has its technocracy, has soft laws. Yeah. However, there are also international regime without bureaucracy, yeah, without any specific headquarter building or other tangible entity, but it is a collection, yeah, of set of rules, such as diplomatic customs, diplomatic immunity, yeah, the way states engage in diplomatic affairs. Yeah. It can also be regarded as forms of international regimes. Now, next to slide number 7, we will talk about the development of regime theory, one of IR theory that can be used to understand international or different international organization and international cooperation. In the beginning, started in the 80s, most importantly, several international scholars were influenced by game theories such as John Nash. Yeah. They start to adopt rational model and game theory in international relations that can provide the foundation to understand politics of international cooperation, yeah, in this ambition of international relations to be a specific branch of science, yeah, political science. Some of the scholars started to adopt more rational actor perspective and positivistic approach. Yeah. And they found that City of the Future and the shifting of payoff structure in game theory help explain why states start to cooperate, yeah, in this anarchic world. Now, in previous meetings, maybe in meeting 3 or meeting 4, we've learned about game theory simulations such as Prisoner's Dilemma, Stuck Hunt, Battle of the Sexes, yeah, coordinated or non-coordination game. Yeah. And you learn that, let's say, for example, in Prisoner's Dilemma, the dominant strategy or the equilibria for the actor is two defects. This is interesting because if you calculate the payoff structure, yeah, and you compare between all of the available values, yeah, the numbers there that we put in the matrix. Now people will arrive at the conclusion that in order to maximize the strategy is for you to defect, yeah, or for you to how can I say, for you to do the defection, yeah, to the defection rather than to cooperate, yeah. And the regime theory comes afterward in order to give explanation on how international cooperation can be sustained, yeah, by understanding the rational design behind institutions. So the basis for regime theory is actually the game theory simulations, yeah, and it is improved. The game theory is improved by understanding that in an international cooperation, you cannot merely only see the bilateral prisoner's dilemma calculation or the reiteration of the game theory simulation. Yeah, this is one of the criticism that regime theory built upon the usage of rational actor model and game theory. Yeah, there are limitations of calculating the result of bilateral negotiations between countries trapped in prisoner's dilemma. Yeah. So regime theories come and aim to give an explanation in the sustained cooperation under international regime. How it can be sustained, something like that. Now let us go to the eighth slide number 8, the regime theory versus game theory, yeah, or prisoner's dilemma. The success of cooperation requires joint actions by all actors involved. Yeah, the success of cooperation, international cooperation, requires joint action by all actors involved. Hence, international cooperation cannot simply decompose into bilateral reiterated prisoners' dilemma, like what we have discussed, and the feasibility and the durability of an international cooperation have to be supported by a well-designed regime. Yeah, so this is the arrangement. Yeah, this is the explanation that the regime theory want to provide to us. How international regime can be feasible and can be really durable, yeah, for the international cooperation. Okay, let us start again the lecture to the slide number 9. The dimensions in designing international regime. There are 5 aspects, 5 dimensions that every international regime have to adjust. And those 5 dimensions are membership, scope, centralization, control, and flexibility. Now, what is the meaning of membership. Membership relates to the rules of accepting member. Yeah, there are different approach. Some international organization can be really exclusive. The other organizations can be inclusive. So, exclusivity versus inclusivity, and also the area of membership, regional or global. Now, number 2 is the scope of cooperation. Scope of issues covered can be varies. Some of the international organization touching upon scientific issues, economic, or perhaps politic issues, security, social, cultural, etc. Decentralization relates to decentralization of tasks in disseminating information, enhancing enforcement, and reducing transaction costs. Disseminating information can be the activity to collect or clearing house, for the best practices, for example, from member states, or the data reported by member states, and disseminate this information for the benefit of the other member states. For example, the WHO in recent situation amidst the pandemic of novel coronavirus SARS-2, the COVID-19, WHO collect data and waiting for the reports from different countries, initially from People's Republic of China for the updated report from Wuhan, for example, and the analysis taken from this data will be circulated to other countries so that other countries can gain the benefit of this information. Information is very important for any other countries to form or to formulate their policy. Enhancing enforcement also very important. WTO, for example, needs the information from member states to, for example, settle the disputes of trade between member countries. And reducing transaction costs, it's very important. As we know, if we use bilateral negotiations, between two countries, creating negotiations again to the other countries, also with other countries in certain issue, repeated negotiation will be costly. Now, if we use international organization centrality, we can create a multilateral process of negotiation that can benefit all member countries, not to create this separated negotiation. So it can save time and resource. Now, control, the other dimension, is about the rules for controlling the institution, who is the most influential in this organization, what is how is the governance in this organization, and collective decision making, how to produce decisions. Also related to the vote, mechanism. Is it weighted vote or equal vote? And last dimension, but not least, is the flexibility. Yeah, the flexibility of arrangement sometimes related to the adaptability of the new environments and transformative development. If you recall to the development of WTO, World Trade Organization, it used to be called General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, yeah, GATT. But because of the changing environment of accelerated or the velocity of globalization, now they set the institution as a very formal organization, yeah, through WTO. The other example of flexibility is about the flexibility in arrangement and its legal bindedness. Yeah. In ASEAN, for example, many arrangements are regarded as non-legally binding. Yeah, it's very flexible because it wants to include as many as member countries as it could in order to create solidarity first before implementation. So in order to be more exclusive, flexibility has to be raised. Yeah. Meanwhile, international organization or regional organizations such as WTO are very rigid in law, in its hard law or arrangement through dispute settlement mechanism, for example. Yeah, and also the European Union, yeah, in the enlargement process, they have this Copenhagen criterion of prospective members. So new members of European Union has to achieve the standard mandated by Copenhagen criterions for democratization process, protection to the human rights, stability of the economy, and the willingness or the efforts of integrating the economy to global economy, and so on and so forth, including the national stability. Yeah, so there's that mechanism are required to ensure that the European Union members uphold the values and uphold the standard that is required by the Union. So 5 dimensions that you have to remember. Number 1 is the membership. Number 2 is the scope of cooperation. Number 3 is centralization. Number 4 is the control. And number 5 is flexibility. Now, in order to make it measurable, tangible, and also comparable, to be compared from one international regime to other international regime, Bu Karamenos, Bapak Lipson, and Bapak Schneider develop the independent variables that can influence the degree of membership scope, centralization, control, and flexibility. And the independent variables, we have 4. The problems of distribution, the problem of enforcement, number, and uncertainty. So what are those? Number 1, distribution problems. The distribution problems related to the bargaining cost. The bargaining cost yeah, or transaction cost, yeah, that has to be burdened by member of the states. Distribution problems occur when there are many targets of cooperation or multiple equilibria. Let's say in prisoner's dilemma, if you have a lot of dilemmas that you have to solve, of course the cost will be higher, yeah, and the multiple equilibria, if you have in the matrix two equilibria, it means the cost will be higher rather than if it is simply pure coordinated games like shake hand, for example, the simulation, or the other is stake hand, yeah, coordination. But if it is a competition, yeah, game, a non-coordinated game, it will be more costly. Or even the battle of the sexes, yeah, the simulation between the husband and wife. The husband want to watch football match, the wife want to watch cinema or want to have a romantic dinner, but or vice versa, the wife want to watch football match, or the husband wants to go to the cinema or romantic dinner. Now the targeted focus are more than one. There will be no focus, so distribution problem might occur, yeah, on who gets what, how and how much, how many. Now this kind of problem will happen in simulation games that has, or game theory that has more than one equilibria. Now enforcement problem, yeah, relate to the prisoner's dilemma, classic equilibria of defection. That is the nature of international relations when you have this anarchic situation. States are inclined to or tend to defect in order to, first of all, secure their interest, and number two, due to of the calculation of cost and benefits, countries eventually will find equilibria is tempting for the defection, yeah, and it hindered them to think about the longer longer period of achievement, yeah. They are short vision and only see what they can get instantly. But that is not what typical international cooperation wants. International cooperation wants to be durable and visible. Yeah. Now the variable number 3 is the number. Yeah, number of actors that doesn't merely depends on geographical proximity, yeah, but also technology and interdependency. Sometimes we cannot really put geographical identification for the membership of such regime. I use this very interesting example of Kazakhstan, yeah, football national football team. Kazakhstan national football team used to be in AFC, ASEAN Football Confederation, yeah, and competing in Asia, but they moved to the UEFA, European Union Football Association, yeah. In UEFA, perhaps they have the Kazakhstan national football team, the Kazakhstan FA, perhaps has their own calculation on why they should go to the Europe. Regarding the achievement, perhaps Kazakhstan can achieve more in Asia, yeah. Can be finalists, even have a potential to be ASEAN champion, getting a silver medal, bronze medal. But if you compete in the European football, sphere, Kazakhstan can improve the quality of the game because of the competitiveness in the Europe is higher than in Asia, for example. So it doesn't really depends on geographical proximity. But also technology and interdependency. Technology, for example, the effect of the usage of such technology, for example, in biodiesel, will bring these countries with biodiesel focus of energy development to work together. Brazil, for example, with Argentina, with Indonesia. Indonesia is working together with Malaysia and Colombia, let's say in palm oil biodiesel conversion or palm oil production, and also interdependency on economic sometimes will be very important. In APEC, we've learned that Asia Pacific are getting closer in terms of economic activities, manufactures, investment. So the organization like APEC has its relevance when dealing with investment, trade, and economic, any deeper of economic integration. And uncertainty, last variables that have to be considered is uncertainty. It does mean about it relates with the uncertainty on the behavior of the other state. Can you predict what a state will decide to respond to a particular issue? Now, in international relations, the nature is that there are incomplete information in the world, that not every nation can predict or can ensure this country, particular administration will do this or do that. Perhaps the more information that you have, the more certain you become. But the information is not always available. And the state of the world, it is related about the consequences of such behavior. If a country defect, what is the consequences to the world? If a country, let's say, defecting to the UNFCCC arrangement or suggestions, what is the result? Incomplete information can add complexities. In what level or how instant the defection on UNFCCC, for example, in deforestation or in emission rate, will affect the world directly. Maybe it has the impact, but countries can neglect this suggested assessment done by epistemic community. Now, if this happens, what is the consequences for the other states, for the other countries? Everyone can be uncertain towards this situation. And uncertainty about other countries' preference. what is the ideological preference of certain countries? Yeah, when we talk about Venezuela, for example, used to be very socialist. What about Venezuela at the moment? Yeah, so many aspects can relate to preference, and the more preference that you have, yeah, the more uncertain the world can be. Uncertainty is the key, yeah, in understanding the world, yeah, in the absence of complete information, yeah, and sometimes you add secrecy, yeah, and confidential information into it, then it will make it more complex. Uncertainty. So independent variables, there are 4: distributions problem, enforcement problem, numbers, and uncertainty. Now, let us move to the next slide, slide number 11. It's related to the rational design conjectures. So, conjectures are the relations, yeah, between the dimensions, 5 dimensions that we've learned: the membership, the scope, centralization, control, and flexibility, and the 4 independent variables, yeah, the distribution, the enforcement, the number, and the uncertainty. There are how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 16, yeah, in total 16 variables, but bear with me. We will take a look at those conjectures. There are 16 conjectures, and we will reviewing one by one. Okay, now number 1, code M, membership designs. What are the available designs, different designs for membership? Bu Koremenos, Pak Lipson, and Pak Snedel provide us with this available design. There are 3 of them. I put my own example to help you understand. Code M1, membership design. Restrictive membership increase, so it will be more restrictive, more exclusive, yeah, the membership increase with the severity of the enforcement problem, yeah. Because of the problem of enforcement, there are so many defections. We don't know who will comply, who will defect, yeah, who will betray the arrangement. Then, if this problem is dominant, then in this particular area or this particular scope of international regime, the membership will be really, really restrictive or exclusive. So the note here that I put, reducing the number of members might help stricter control on the enforcement, yeah, and collective action might be problematic in a large group with the free riders or defectors. This is what Ibu Koremenos, Pak Lipson, and Pak Snedel argue. Reducing the number of members might help stricter control on the enforcement, and collective action may be problematic in a large group with free riders or defectors. Yeah, of course, when you have a lot of free riders and defectors, yeah, collective action will have to be problematic, become problematic. So here The example that I give is in the logo there, the logo of NATO, yeah, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So NATO surely wants the member to uphold the values, yeah, and the goals, normative goals that NATO want to establish. Yeah. So if you are not a democracy, of course, they don't want to put you into the NATO. Yeah. If you do not use the same standard of weaponry, yeah, it can also very problematic. So they put a lot of standard and will be very strict. Yeah. Of course, also NATO wants to know about the preference, the ideological preference, the approach on security, and so on and so forth. And if it resonates with the other members of NATO, doesn't violate any values or norms, then this country can be considered to join NATO. Yeah, so that is one of the examples. You can find as many examples as you could, and please let me know in the comment section below what is the example of code M1 conjectures number M1 restrictive membership increase with the severity of the enforcement problem. Okay, now number 2, restrictive membership M2, yeah. Restrictive membership increases with uncertainty about preference. Yeah, so an international regime will avoid to accept new members that do not share the same values and commitments. You don't want to have countries that don't have commitment on the same page. Yeah. This here I put the example of OPEC, Organization of Petroleum and Oil Exporting Countries. An international regime will avoid to accept new members that do not share the same values. Of course, petroleum exporting countries have their own aspirations, yeah, on the market of oils. Yeah. So the membership also become very restrictive. Not all countries can join the OPEC. Yeah, Indonesia used to join the OPEC, but since we are no longer net oil exporters, we don't join OPEC anymore, because the mechanism there will be only addressing the net oil exporters. Yeah. In order to stabilize the price of the oil, we don't have the ability to do that anymore. So has to be out of OPEC. Yeah. Now, inclusive membership. Yeah. Number 3, M3, inclusive membership. So more slots for membership increases with the severity of the distribution problem. Because if you only have small numbers of members, you can collect enough money or enough resource to run the programs, yeah? The distribution problem. So sometimes some international organization that want to touch upon many or vast area of cooperation really needs bigger amount of contributions, collected contributions. By doing so, or by opening by opening the membership to many members, it will create more opportunity for solving this distribution problem. More institutional contributions comes, and if it is not if it is not contribution from the state, it can be arrangement that allows trade, or we call it like linkage, between the one that have surplus in several sector, and this particular member can contribute more in this sector. Meanwhile, in the other sector in which they don't have any advantage, they can get the subsidized, let's say, contribution, from other countries. So it creates this kind of linkage. The more, the merrier situation of membership for the benefits of all. So inclusive membership increases with the severity of the distribution problem. And last, the membership can offer a solution for zero-sum game tendency and equally distribute more benefits to more members by the availability of other members' surplus of resources, albeit, of course, it is difficult to achieve in an ideal of efforts to achieve this kind of situation. And here I'll put the example of United Nations. United Nations as one international organization that can tell the this kind of tendency. The conjectures number M3. Inclusive membership increases with the severity of the distribution of the problem of distribution problem. Okay, let us continue to slide number 13. Slide number 13 is about scope designs. Here, Bu Karomenos, Pak Lipson, and Pak Snyder has provided us with three different or three varieties of scope designs. Code S1, scope increases with number. Here stated that greater heterogeneity within the international regime will further promote greater scope of cooperation. The reasoning behind is that if you have a lot of members with different capacity, different stage of economic development, you might want to break the cooperation into different staging, and also try to accommodate the needs of other members of international organization that is not ready yet with the new arrangement, with other arrangement that can be easily followed. So in this kind of situation, it is normal for international organization to think about other scope of cooperation. Let's say we talk about here the example is ASEAN. I put ASEAN as an example because not because of the number of the members are a lot, but it is more towards the heterogeneity itself. A lot of different variation in ASEAN in terms of types of regime, in terms of cultures, in terms of readiness in economic integration to global markets, in terms of level of development, economic development, and so on and so forth. So ASEAN can be regarded as having big number as in the heterogeneity rather than a big number in the number itself. With this kind of situation, ASEAN apparently has expanded the cooperation. Yeah, if cooperation in political sector cannot be achieved, then perhaps they can pursue for economic cooperation or socio-cultural cooperation. Hence, in ASEAN, we have three pillars of cooperation ranging from political security, economic cooperation, and socio-cultural ones. This will promote greater engagement of these diverse members, and their interests can be accommodated. Yeah. The next code, S2, scope of cooperation increases with the severity of the distribution problem. Distribution problems can be solved by providing linkage, yeah, and negotiating one issue and link the cost with advantages on other issues that is useful for cooperation. It means the severity of the distribution problem with organization with not many big powers want to invest, yeah, in this organization. Not many investment done by those countries who are willing to or take the side payment for transaction costs. It is necessarily for them to increase the scope and can, so that this organization can cooperate in many areas of cooperation that they can think about. Yeah, and this has been one of the methods that the non-alignment movement is doing. Yeah, it's very famous in the Cold War era, but still the cooperation still continues. Started from Asia-Africa Conference, and then later this initiative of NAM happens, what been initiated and becomes quite big in numbers of membership, and also quite wide range in types of cooperation. Yeah. And S3, number 3, the scope increase with the severity of the enforcement problem. Yeah, linkage and trade of benefits in several issues will help states to comply with negotiated terms of agreement. Now, I will invite you to imagine in WTO there are so many linkage of talks and negotiated arrangement, not only in one sector of community, but the other sector of community. You can linkage your interest in automotive industry with your interest in agriculture, and this the interest not necessarily having congruent or similar goals, but you can expect that this linkage of the scope negotiated in WTO are there to enforce, yeah, to help the enforcement. Yeah, for example, a country will can actually because they don't have interest in let's say in wine trade, but because of that, this country will put a lot of tariffs on that, and non-tariff barrier as well, to limit the influx of this kind of product. But remember, this particular country that do this protection policy with tariffs can get retaliation in different sector of economy or commodity. For example, if they are exporting crops or poultry, then other countries might file or might also do the same restriction to this country's commodity, and with linkage of these different commodities, it can create very credible threat for defection, and the example of WTO can clearly show that countries will rather cooperate instead of violate the arrangement that has been agreed upon. Those are the scope designs. If you have another example, please do let me know. Now we move to slide number 14. Slide number 14 related to centralization designs. Here, code C1. Centralization increases with uncertainty about behavior. Uncertainty about what a country have done in the past and how it would affect to the performance of this country in the moment or in the future. So information about the past records, to be centralized, this information in the hand of the international organization or international regime is important. So information about the past records of members are important to detect non-cooperative tendencies or non-cooperative behaviors. One of the example is the IMF are gathering the performance of the programs done, economic programs done by member countries, the monetary policies, the fiscal policies, whether they did the structural adjustment program or not, whether they can really perform with the agreed clause for the credits and so on and so forth. So if IMF have more and more information, IMF can reduce the uncertainty about the behavior of these troubled countries. Now C2, code C2 centralization increases with uncertainty about the state of the world. So not only about uncertainty about the preference or the behavior of a certain state, but also in general the world situation, the state of the world. Here, a collective information sharing mechanism is important, to face unprecedented crisis. So if the type of regime that you want to build is related to common problem of the world, of humanity, it's necessary for this organization to have a centrality role in data collection, information collection. Here I put the role of WHO, in order to respond to pandemic of COVID-19. Information is crucial, and has to be analyzed, has to be gathered, reported voluntarily by countries, and or it's better for a mechanism to encourage countries to be honest, reporting what is the situation in that particular country, so that WHO and other countries can learn about a better strategy of response. Now, number C3, code C3, centralization increases with number. Centralization can help reduce the cost of bilateral negotiations or bilateral arrangement. Setting a global standard will be more effective with more members. The standardization of SOP or procedures or a mechanism, yeah, in many sector of cooperation can be really useful for the operation. Here, the example I give is the Universal Postal Union. So the way you post a letter, the way you post a package from one country, and also the payment, yeah, the conversion of the values that you pay. It should be standardized, yeah, so that you can easily send a package from one country to other country. Yeah, and they put all of this information. Yeah, when you go to the post office will input your data, the the direction, the address that you want to reach, and also the serial numbers of your package. If they put it together into one network, they can trace in the internet, in the other side of the direction. In the other country will also input whether your packet has reached the outer post, yeah, outer in the first embarkation in the airport, and they just they can put the date and the hour it reached the outer post office, and then to the provinces in the post office in the provinces or in the other prefecture, to the other states. And when it arrives to you, the destination, the one who received the package will sign, and it will be informed to you via internet. All needs that standardization of procedures, yeah, and not only procedure, also the packaging itself. It has a standard, and it will ease, yeah, it will create certainty as well, yeah. So centralization increase with number. The more countries are connected through this postal arrangement. Now let us move to the C4 code C4. Centralization increase with the severity of the enforcement problem. Yeah. To ensure countries to comply, sometimes not an easy task to do. Yeah. Most of the time, it's proven to be very difficult. To ensure states comply with the arrangement, centrality of information is needed. Yeah. You have all of the info that you need, yeah, to ensure states comply with you. If not complying, then you can find the underperform sector, and then you can file a case, yeah, to the dispute settlement mechanism, and so on and so forth. And the centralization will be higher. Here I put the example of the Benelux. Yeah, the number of the Benelux, of course, are very exclusive. Only Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, and centralization among them are very high. Yeah, in the Benelux, so that used to be really beneficial for them to do the coordination. Perhaps even have a better uniform coordination if we compare with the European Union. So that is that's all the centralization design from C1 to C4. Okay, we go to slide number 15. Slide number 15, control designs. The offered variations for control, we have 3 variations. Variation number 1, code V1, control decreases with number. When you have more members to the organization, of course the control to the individual member will be lesser, decreased. With the increasing number of the numbers, the control to individual members will incrementally diminish. Here, one of the example is the ILO, International Labour Organization. Naturally, all of members of the UN will join this arrangement. However, can we really assure the effectivity of the control of the ILO to the domestic policies of member countries? Well, it will be incrementally more difficult for ILO to monitor all of the members of the organization, of course. Hence, there are varieties in labor treatment, treatments to the labor from different governments in the world. Code V2, asymmetry of control. The asymmetry of control increases with the asymmetry of contributors, the number. Here, in order to make it clear, the bigger contribution of several member states will produce bigger gap in organizational control. If the locomotive of the cooperation is in the hand of a country or several key member countries, then the decision or the influential role will be in the hand of these countries that play the role as the locomotive to fund, to support, to initiate a lot of arrangement. Then this country will become gradually more influential. Here the example that I give is the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC. As we know, that United States of America is the one that initiated this cooperation, and without the attentive approach from the US anymore, the organization then become lesser and lesser relevant in world politics today. Here we also learn that in an organization with weighted vote, some countries have a bigger vote than the other countries. The initiative and the support tends to come from these key members. Not like in ASEAN, for example. In ASEAN, the contribution have to be equal from 10 member countries. Hence, the vote is equal. Now, the asymmetry of control will happen if there is asymmetry contributions, from several member states. Those who contribute more has more influence. Now, V3, the last code, V3, control increases with uncertainty about the state of the world. Now, the incomplete information can happen, hence control will need to be tightened. International regimes will increase control and monitoring system, when the nature of the issue or specific issue that they cooperate is uncertain. Here I give you the example of IAEA, International Atomic Energy, for the control over nuclear development, especially when you have non-proliferation treaty and you have countries that deem to have no rights, let's say, to establish a nuclear weapon. International Atomic Energy Agency will monitor the usage of atomic energy worldwide, and if there is some violation, then international sanctions will follow. Because of the nature of the issue itself. You can name some other influential international regime that also operates this way. There's all the control designs. V1, control decrease with number. V2, asymmetry of control increases with asymmetry of contributors. V3, control increases with uncertainty about the state of the world. The flexibility design is in slide number 16. There are three offered options. F1, flexibility increases with uncertainty about the state of the world. Here, due to the rapid changing nature of particular cooperation, many regimes rely to soft law arrangement. Because of the scientific data is limited, a lot of new data, the changing of the environment, and so on and so forth, that states not really have a full grasp of what really happening there. They tend to put it more flexible, with soft law or only with, let's say, soft directions. Like what I give you the example here. Also, Bu Karamenas also give this kind of example, the Antarctic Treaty, the treaty between nation states in governing the exploration in the Antarctic continent, down in the south, because of the uncertainty or the knowledge that is limited. There are several requirements and several guidance that countries have to follow if they want to explore. For example, no claim over the land, no claim on a territorial, effective territorial occupation, and so on and so forth. And the suggestion to share the information, as a clearinghouse, as a database for all in Antarctic exploration. F2, flexibility increases with the severity of the distribution problem. In order to navigate future unwanted consequences of changing nature of the world, countries are willing to cooperate today under contested precondition. The flexibility is given or is designed because of the distribution problem. If if countries stop to coordinate, then it will be unbeneficial for all. And this can be understood in stagnant game-like situation in responding to the climate change. Hence, I give you the example of the UN framework for climate change, UNFCCC. It is better for countries to join. Hence, the flexibility should be also there in order to give opportunity more visible for countries to join, talk, and discuss what is good for the planet. Now, F3, the very last conjectures today, is the flexibility decreases with number. So once your organization in this international organization or regional organization increase or enlarge the membership, there will be a tendency to make everything more legal and more formal. With membership enlargement, international regime will elevate mechanisms and regulations into a formal and legally binding agreements or arrangements. And one of the best examples is the European Union. As we know, European Union has been enlarged, and open to the possible enlargement in the future. However, the flexibility will be decreased by the time, because of the requirement that they really need to impose for the new members has to be preserved. And it's very important for the European Union to keep the values of democracy, protection on the human rights, and also market integration, economic performance, and stability, in order for them to keep striving. Those are the 16 conjectures that we can learn, and we can use this platform, this framework for our research, in order to help analyze, to help identify the development of an international cooperation, institutionalized international cooperation. Now, in the last slide number 17, there I have a picture of apparently a platform or a forum of several countries there. Please do let me know what is the name of this regime or international institution that is shown by the picture, and please do let me know what kind of conjectures that relevant to identify this grouping here in the picture. What do you think? Don't hesitate to fill in your comments in the comment section below. That's all for the material today. Be spirited. We will continue the online courses. I'm glad that you guys still following carefully this lecture. See you again in different topic. Bye bye.